Hi, my name's Tracy Daly.
My name's Ellen Daly.
And we've not recorded this twice already, I promise.
Never.
Good news is the new mic works. So, you're at the dentist tomorrow.
Yes, dentist tomorrow.
And what you having done?
Having a filling and having them clean.
How do you feel about that?
Fine. I think.
Okay. Because I used to hate the dentist, and you'll know if you've read Mentality that I was needle phobic for quite a while, and they scared the hell out of me. But as it happens, I know your dentist, and she's absolutely amazing, and that's all dealt with now. She does all my work, and I can't fault her in the slightest, so you'll be absolutely fine. There is a little bit of news, though, about a French dentist who, I think it was 2 days ago, he got sentenced rather, and he was butchering thousands of low-income patients so as he'd have a constant stream of return work.
It's nice of him.
Just a little bit ghastly to know that before you go to the dentist.
Yeah, a little bit. Never mind. I didn't know that either until now.
I'll wait for a couple of weeks before I make my appointment, I think.
I'll make it for you tomorrow.
I'm glad I'm not in France. You don't have to, really. You can, but you don't have to. But no, she is sound and you'll be absolutely fine. So, we're going to cover Peter Bryan. Do you know anything about Peter?
You mentioned something about Clover the other day. Other than that, that's literally all I know. I haven't looked into it. And you haven't mentioned anything.
Okay, let's see how we go.
As far as I'm aware.
I've got this written out a really specific way as well, so I hope this works slightly different from how I usually do this. So, 1993 was filled with action for the UK. My mother was killed on the 3rd of September 1993. Meatloaf was number 1 with I Will Do Anything for Love. And the Christmas number 1 was Mr. Blobby, which I hated.
Gotta love Mr. Blobby.
I hated it. I absolutely detested it. I hate it. Why did you love Mr. Blobby?
I was a kid. It was fun. It was exciting.
So was Mr. Blobby. He was irritating. You found him exciting?
It was. At the time, it was very fun and exciting. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure it'd be irritating now. But as
it's
a
like
child...
Crazy Frog.
But again, as a child...
My sister listened to it on repeat. Over and over again. And QVC launched its first television shopping channel in the UK. Yeah, I know.
I know a couple of people who like QVC.
I had to put that in there because it's the most boring thing in the world. It's basically paying to watch adverts, but a couple of your relatives are very much like, oh my god, QVC's on all day and this is epic.
I don't know about all day and this is epic, but I know that they do buy, I think especially like Christmas bits and ornaments. Yeah. Yeah,
no, not for me. And of course, who will ever forget the horrible and unfortunate case of James Bulger, an innocent killed in Merseyside by 2 boys after they abducted him. It was not a good year. Fitting then that this is when our story begins. On March 18th, 1993, Nish Sheth, who was 20 years old, was working in her parents' shop alongside her 12-year-old brother, Bobby. They'd had to fire Peter Bryan the previous week as he'd been caught stealing clothes from the shop. Peter had a huge infatuation with Nish and was convinced he was in love with her. So Bryan, of Derby Street, Forest Gate, East London, was not at all happy about being fired. Now, you grew up, give or take, around that area, didn't you? How close is that to where you grew up? Without giving major details. What do you know about Forest Gate?
I don't know too much about Forest Gate, but I would imagine it's within an hour's drive.
Oh, okay, so it's not as close as I thought it was to where you grew up then. Okay.
I might be wrong, it might be a little bit closer than that.
He returned to the store, knocked Bobby to the floor, and then beat Nish over the head with a claw hammer while she was on the phone. She was dead before the ambulance arrived. You know, because he was in love with her.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a difference in infatuation and being in love with someone to being psycho.
Well, he'd apparently, it doesn't say how, but he'd let known his infatuation, he'd let known his feelings several times. It doesn't go into how.
So maybe
when.
possibly she'd rejected him.
Several times. And then they caught him stealing. So they had no choice but to get rid of him. An hour later, and high on cannabis, he jumped from a third-floor balcony in an apparent suicide attempt. He survived and admitted manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility, which we've heard how many times?
Yeah, a few.
He was locked up in Rampton Court Maximum Security Psychiatric Unit without limit of time, but was released 8 years later. Some sources actually say 9 years later.
Okay.
Now going backwards ever so slightly.
Mm-hmm.
He was born in 1969. He was the youngest of 7 kids.
Yeah.
Left school at 14 or 15 and worked on the market stalls before teaching cooking at the local soup kitchen.
Fair enough.
So he was teaching cooking at a local soup kitchen.
Teaching or just cooking at a soup kitchen?
It says teaching cooking at a local soup
okay.
kitchen, which I got the impression of he boiled soup. And he said, this is how you boil soup. Maybe there was more to it than that, but that's pretty much the level that I got of that.
Okay.
Now in East London, 1987, police were called when he tried to throw a resident of the 6th floor. Despite a gash to the victim's head, no further action was taken by police.
He decided to throw a resident?
Yep. 1987, he's had a Barney with a resident. He's tried to throw him off the balcony 6 floors up. There was a gash to the victim's head and no further action was taken by police. So you can go make the argument, well, it was 1987, if you're having a punch-up and you turned up and you both went, yeah, no, I don't want to press charges, that they generally let it go and be like, you know, it's between 2 people, I don't need to take them in. It's 1987.
I suppose there's no sort of kind of video evidence and other witness and media evidence, is it, in those days as well?
Whereas today, they generally go, the guy's got a head injury, we're taking you in. You know, even if they took you in for like 6 hours and cooled off period and kicked you both out again.
Yeah.
But it is different. 6 years later, this takes us back up to current time, in 1993, he would be caught stealing from the clothes shop on King's Road and get fired from his job. And we know what happened there.
Yeah.
Okay. He is a person of colour and he came over, I believe, from Barbados. Or his parents came over from Barbados.
Why do you have to say a person of colour?
I could say a black person.
Yeah.
But
I'm a person of colour. I'm a person of white colour.
Fair enough. I believe the PC term is person of colour. I'll be honest.
Do you know what? I find that really hard because, hey, I'm white. Call me white. If you're black, I'm going to call you black.
And generally
speaking... And that's not being mean or nasty or racist. I'm just saying what it is. Same as a child would say.
Generally speaking, that's how I work. But... I mean, take Leroy. Leroy was gold and he was absolutely hilarious. Does that make sense?
Yep.
He was absolutely hilarious. And I remember walking into the shop one day and then turning around, he was sweating cobs. And I said, "You alright, mate?" And he went, "No, they're working me like a black man." And I was just, wow, that was funny. And he was absolutely hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
And generally, that's how I work. However, with writing this out, it didn't matter whether the person was black or white. But I felt because it was East London, it needed to be said because it makes a big point. Okay, especially when you say they came over from Barbados, there was immigrants essentially, and there was a family of 8. There's a big stereotype.
Fair enough.
So that's why I said person of colour rather than saying black man, in case they took it as negative connotations, and it's not meant in that way in the slightest. God, how many black people do we know? Or
no problem.
white, green, yellow, whatever, it makes no difference, you know?
Carry on.
So Peter was moved to Rampton Court Maximum Security Psychiatric Unit. Again, it says here for 8 years. Some people argue 9. And he was then moved to a lower security facility due to having made considerable psychiatric progress. With me so far?
Yeah, with you so far. I'd assume that they'd say that anyways, because that's the whole point of moving to a sort of less secure facility, as it were.
Yeah, it's to become reformed, isn't it? To incorporate you back into society.
Is to make progress and be able to go down to less security.
He's tried to chuck somebody off a building, and then he's taken out a 20-year-old in front of a 12-year-old with a claw hammer. He's got 8 years in a maximum security, and then they've lowered it. Peter Bryan then now had the ability to mask his desires from other people. So his intent to harm, we'll say at this point, from other people.
Well,
go on.
I was going to say, if you're in like a maximum security, then you've not really got the opportunity to harm, as far as I'm aware.
1 point. You'll always have the opportunity to harm to a degree, but
yeah, to a degree. So that desire might still be there, but hasn't got the people or the items to facilitate it.
I believe it's much more than that, and I'm going to use Dean again as an example because we got him sectioned twice, and on those occasions he stayed in for a period of time. But when we finally got him to go to a hospital or took him to a hospital, and he was having an episode where he'd eaten his glasses or was peeing in the bins or was generally harming himself in some fashion or another. At one point he had a tennis ball sized lump on the side of his face where he kept hitting himself. Kept thinking people were going to kill him. He went to the hospital, and this will be presumably different, especially for people in America where their medical situation is totally different.
Yeah.
They took him to the hospital. We took him to the hospital. He went in. He was in there an hour and a half. Yeah, he's going to stay in. Going to keep him in. This and this. Come back 2 hours later. He's walking in his front door. Oh, I'm absolutely fine. No problem whatsoever. No, it's all right. It was all resolved now. They said I'd take this new medication. It wouldn't be an issue. They'd not done a thing with him. He'd literally talked them into believing that he was absolutely fine, because that's in part what these facilities train you to do.
Yeah.
It's just like you go to prison. What do? They say, oh, it's to reform you. You're learning from criminals. They might not be the best criminals, otherwise they won't be in prison, but they're learning a trade.
Yeah.
It might not be a kosher trade, but it's a similar principle. When you go to one of these units, you learn to hide it because you want to be out, or you genuinely get better. And that's presumably what happened in this situation.
Maybe.
Peter Bryan had a short stay at Riverside Hospital, Seven Sisters, North London, where he was caught blowing raspberries. So, big black man, caught blowing raspberries. Gives me an image of like...
childish mentality.
It
childish
does.
Mind.
The film where they were in the prison, I can't remember the fellow's name, The Green Mile.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? You didn't see that because it's on microphone, but Ellen was like, oh, my heart. Yeah, it gives me an image of The Green Mile. It gives me an image of like Mice and Men.
Yeah.
Which, one of my favourite books growing up. But there's a little twist.
I still have my Mice and Men book from school.
I need to read that again.
That I stole, and it's got my notes still in the margins of the book.
No, I'm not reading that now. I hate people who do Facebooks. That's disgusting. Don't do it again.
We had to. It was part of like our course book. You had to margin in the lines, and it's still got the old writing.
It's a good keepsake. It's a good keepsake.
Yeah.
It's a good keepsake. However, there was a twist. He was caught blowing raspberries on a 16-year-old girl's stomach.
Huh.
And that's whilst he was at the Riverside Hospital, Seven Sisters, London.
That's fun.
He was then transferred and treated as a care in the community patient at Topaz Ward in Newham General Hospital. And it was agreed on February the 17th, 2004, that he could leave the ward as much as he wanted.
Why was he with a 16-year-old?